Attention wrestling fans, you're now about to listen to the man coming down the aisle from the main streets of South Elgin, Illinois, with a microphone in his hand and questions on his mind. This is Whaddya Say with DDJ.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of Whaddya Say with DDJ. Joining me this week is the author of the awesome children's book, S Is For Suplex. That would be Ryan Schrodt. So sit back, relax, grab a cold one, get into your favorite comfy spot, and enjoy episode 28 of Whaddya Say with DDJ. And my guest this week, Ryan Schrodt, the author of S Is For Suplex.
Hello, wrestling fans. Steve Aaron here, one half the commentary team of Chicagoland Championship Wrestling, also the general manager of Chicago Style Wrestling. And you are listening to Whaddya Say with DDJ.
All right, welcome to another episode of Whaddya Say with DDJ, and joining me today is my pretty good friend and author of the awesome kids wrestling book S Is For Suplex, which you can get on Amazon, and I'm sure there are other places that you can get this, and I'll let my guy here tell you about it. He is the author of this book. His name is Ryan Schrodt. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming on. And that, like we were talking a little bit before I started hitting record, it's a great book. My son loves it. And that, so I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all my other guests when I have on here. And that is, how did you discover professional wrestling?
With me, wrestling's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
It actually goes back a couple generations in my family, which is why the book is dedicated to my grandmother, my mom, and then my own daughter. My grandma used to take my mom and my uncles to regional wrestling shows back in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, wow.
So they used to see, folks like Bobo Brazil and Pat O'Connor, whenever they'd come through the Midwest and they'd come through Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom got my brother and I hooked on wrestling. And I was just at like the perfect age for the Hulk Hogan rock and wrestling era. My first memory of watching wrestling was back when they would do repeats of wrestling on Showtime. So
Okay.
I watched WrestleMania 2 that way. But yeah, wrestling's just always been there for me.
That's awesome. So when you started watching, how old were you when you really started getting into it?
I mean, I was probably around 4 or 5 when it became something that was more than just background noise, and it was something that I really started to love.
Mm-hmm. And who were some of your early favorites?
I was a huge Ultimate Warrior fan, huge Macho Man fan. Like most kids, I was a pretty big Hulkster. My brother was more into like Roddy Piper and Ric Flair, which was cool because then when I got older, I learned to really appreciate how awesome they are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And they're probably my two favorites now. But for me, when I was little, Ultimate Warrior was the man.
Nice. I know I've got a cousin of mine who lives in Indiana who talks about when the Warrior beat Honky Tonk Man in like 30 seconds at SummerSlam to win the Intercontinental title. That's what cemented his love of professional wrestling. And
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned Flair. Flair's my favorite of all time and stuff. If you had to, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you had to come up with the top 5 of your all-time favorites, who would it be? Don't have to be, in any particular order.
So Flair is number 1 for me.
Mine too.
It took me a while to get around to Flair from when I was younger. But after that, hands down, he's my favorite. Then probably Macho Man. Like I said, Roddy Piper. And then after that, I guess I got to go with somebody more modern.
Okay.
I'd probably say Daniel Bryan.
Okay.
And then, I'll throw somebody out from the book just so that we can have that I'm going to say together the Rock and Roll Express. They're my favorite tag team of all time.
They're probably, I would put them in terms of my tag teams. I think I'd have them at number 3. When it comes to tag teams, my number 1, Road Warriors. Number 2, I'm a huge fan of the Dudley Boys and stuff. I'd probably put Rock and Roll at number 3.
I would put the Dudley Boys a little bit higher, but I was shamed at my first WWE show. I was in college and I wore pretty thick black rimmed glasses. Okay. And I was walking out of the bathroom and somebody yelled, "Hey, look, it's the new Dudley Boy, Chubby Dudley."
Wow.
And so because of that, I've always kind of held a little grudge against the Dudley Boys, but I was a huge ECW mark. So
didn't they? I believe they actually had someone in ECW that was known as Chubby Dudley back when like the Dudleys were like this big, family.
They had everybody like Big Dick Dudley and Sign Guy Dudley. They probably did.
Yeah, there was somebody named Chubby Dudley, I believe. And they also had like Snot Dudley, Dances with Dudley. I think they even had someone called Dudley Dudley. But yeah, so you mentioned being a fan of the Dudleys in ECW. I mean, did you get a chance to watch a lot of ECW? Because I know back in, like the mid 90s when it was just kind of starting to gain steam, you could only really find it on like, local public access channels.
I did actually. I had a friend who, I don't know how he got hooked up with somebody out of New York who would send us copies of old ECW shows. So he would just send us VHS tapes that were just full, and we would just stay up till like 2 a.m. watching ECW. And then, when they were on pay-per-view, we'd always pitch together and order it. But and then as soon as I got the WWE Network, first thing I did was rewatch Heatwave. Because that was the first pay-per-view that I watched.
Which Heatwave, if you don't mind me asking?
I want to say it was 99, maybe.
Okay.
All I know is that I think the Dudleys were in the opener, and I think it had Sandman in the main event. I'd have to rewatch it, but yeah, it was. I just remember it blew my mind because I had never seen ECW up to that point, and my friends were like, "You got to come see this. You're never going to believe some of the stuff these guys are getting away with," and I was immediately hooked. But oddly enough, my favorite ECW wrestler, the least ECW guy, Lance Storm.
Nice. He's a good one. When it comes to ECW, I'd have to go with, in terms of like my favorite ECW wrestler all time, I got to go with the Innovator of Violence, Tommy Dreamer.
Oh yeah, love Dreamer.
Yes, he's an awesome dude. And he's if you've ever had a chance to meet him in person, you'd probably agree with me. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet.
He really is. I met him about a year and a half ago at a Wrestling Revolver show here in Iowa.
Okay.
And the coolest part about that was that he couldn't get his kendo stick on the airplane, but a friend of mine had made one. And so he got to use it in the match that night and then signed it for him.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
yeah,
that's got to be the coolest wrestling memorabilia I've ever seen from anybody, is a kendo stick they made that was then used in a match.
That's awesome. Yeah. Really quick Tommy Dreamer story. I met him at the first Starcast, but last year he was at C2E2, and one of my really good friends was going to go to C2E2 because he wanted to meet Tommy Dreamer, because Dreamer's one of his favorites. And like last minute he had to bow out because he had to, his wife was having some kind of surgery, so he had to be with her. And I was like, you know what, I was going to surprise him, and be like, yeah, I'm going to get him, give him a Tommy Dreamer autograph. So I went up to Tommy, got the picture, and he's like, who do I make this out to? And I told him, I said, can you make it out to my friend Jimmy? And then I started explaining to him, it's like, yeah, he was supposed to come on, he was supposed to be coming with me to this show, but he had to back out because his wife was having surgery. So Tommy's like, well, what's his phone number? And it's like, can you call him on your phone? So like I dialed him up, and I called him, and I handed the phone over to Tommy, and Tommy was going to talk to him, like actually on the phone, but my friend didn't answer the phone. So Tommy Dreamer left him a voicemail, and I called my friend back. I called my friend back. I was like, dude, you should have answered the phone, or I'm like, listen to your voicemail and stuff. But he got the kick out of it. And I just thought that was like one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. I mean, I didn't even ask him to do that. That was all Tommy's idea and stuff. So, so yeah, we're talking about this, a lot of, what's going on with this pandemic and everything, it's really impacted, not being able to go to wrestling shows and not being able to do like a lot of meet and greets with the guys and stuff. But back before the pandemic hit, what were probably some of the more memorable meet and greets you've experienced?
Got probably the first one that I had, because it wasn't even it wasn't actually like a meet and greet. It was somewhere at a table at a comic book convention. It was actually here in my hometown of Dubuque, Iowa, and Billy Gunn was there.
Okay.
And so I'd never met him before and was able to just, there wasn't a whole lot of people in the show. So I was able to go up and just talk to him for about 20 minutes. It was just super memorable. So that was really cool. And then anytime I go to a lot of Wrestling Revolver shows, which is Sami Callihan's promotion.
Right. Yeah, I would love to go to one of those shows someday.
Oh man, they're fantastic. But they run shows here out of Iowa and always do meet and greets there. And those are always great because 9 times out of 10, whoever you're talking to, 6 months down the road, they're going to be on TV.
That's awesome. And that's so yeah. So you obviously, one of the things, we as wrestling fans, probably miss more than anything with everything going on is going to, shows on a more regular basis. I know you just recently went to one about a week or so ago. I went last time I went to one was in October, and I'm actually going to one in April. What is it like, obviously pre-pandemic, because I always talk to people about this, and I kind of want to get your opinion on this. Wrestling's great, like watching it on TV, you can sit back, you don't have to worry about any lines for the bathroom, you don't have to worry about paying, $10 for a beer and stuff like that. But what is the experience like actually going to a wrestling show versus watching it on TV for you?
The energy of the crowd is really what makes it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a little show, a former bowling alley or something, or it's going to a big show at the Allstate Arena or something. The crowd, that energy that you can physically feel it in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is just the coolest thing in the world, is when something exciting happens, especially if it's something unpredictable. Like, yeah, it's cool to watch it on your couch, but then when it happens live and you're there and everybody's screaming and cheering, and there's "this is awesome" chants going on, or if you're an indie show or something spills it right into your seats and you've got, next thing you know, you're helping a wrestler up. There's nothing like it. It takes you from being a wrestling fan to like a wrestling zealot.
Right.
It changes everything. And I mean, I had that from my first wrestling show that I'd ever gone to. I'd been a wrestling fan for my whole life, and then didn't actually go to a wrestling show until I was in college. And we had complete nosebleed seats to a SmackDown taping.
Mm-hmm.
And it still like completely changed how I viewed wrestling.
Right. Yeah. My first show was, I probably just been into wrestling because I didn't actually get into wrestling. I was born in 1980. I didn't start regularly watching wrestling till like late 90, early 91. My grandfather, God rest his soul, was the one that got me into it and stuff. And my first actual live event I went to was a house show at the was now known as the Allstate Arena, but back when it was still the Rosemont Horizon, it was like, I think it was like July of 91 and stuff. It was just a WWF house show, but man, it was just, yeah. It's like seeing it on TV, but man, just being there live and just feeling the energy and the crowd and stuff. Yeah, it's a completely different experience.
Absolutely. And my last show prior to the pandemic was Aew Revolution.
Oh, you were there?
I was. I actually, Sammy Guevara hooked me up like a week beforehand because I had posted on social media that I wasn't going. And he's in the book, which we'll get to in a minute. But
yes, absolutely.
He just messaged me. He's like, "Hey, like I will hook you up. Come out to the show." So my wife and I went, and that was one of the hottest crowds I've ever had for any wrestling show.
Yep.
And so for that to be your last show for like a year, I was like, this is all I'm craving, is that moment again of how great that show was.
Yeah, I was actually there too. I mean, I got through Ryan Barkin, who owns Pro Wrestling Tees and basically runs that empire. He actually hooked me up with a really good deal on a couple of tickets for the second row. So yeah, I was like really right up there, and just, man, that crowd. I mean, just from the tag team title match between the Bucks and then Omega and Hangman Page, which I've gone on record to say is the greatest match I've ever seen live.
Oh,
and I was actually at WrestleMania 13 for Brett versus Austin.
Oh, wow.
So that tells you how good I thought that match was. But one of the things that really stuck out about me on that show was how over Orange Cassidy was.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's just, I mean, I've never been part of a match where even before he and I think it was Pac, if I'm not mistaken, he went up against that night. They were like, I'd never seen a match where the crowd was chanting, "This is awesome," before the two guys even locked up. And and it's just amazing. It goes just to speak volumes about just, despite the character that he portrays, man, it's just how over Orange Cassidy was. And I
absolutely
anything like that. So,
well, and our seats were right behind the choir that came out to sing for Jericho's entrance.
Oh, nice.
None of them were wrestling fans, other than like the one woman that had sang the video on YouTube that got Jericho's attention. And so hearing them from like the beginning of the night when they were kind of like joking about wrestling and like, oh, this is like, they were having a good time. But by the end of the night, we're so invested.
Yep.
Just shows the power of seeing wrestling live.
And that's really true. I mean, my wife, she's not a wrestling fan. I've tried many times. She's gone with me to a couple shows and stuff, like when we first started dating and that, but now that's kind of a thing, like a guy's night out for me. I mean, I would love for her to come more. I can't wait till things open up a little bit more, because I really want to take her and then my son to a show and stuff. But it's just, that's one of the things I've seen it a lot. Like I was at All Out and I was sitting second row, and a friend of mine who had flown in from New York with his wife for the show was sitting in front of me. We were all kind of sitting together in a group, and his wife had never been to a wrestling show. And I was talking with her throughout the night, and I was talking with my buddy, and he had told me it's just like how, I think it was either after the show or something like that like how she went from, kind of, but she like, and I sat there like through the show, and the deeper into the show we got, the more she got into it and stuff. And yeah, it's just amazing how like someone who may not think twice about wrestling, may not think much about it, but they just get that experience, and it's like, then they get it, regardless if if they keep their fandom or if it grows, but at least they get it.
Absolutely.
And that, so yeah, so we're going to get kind of more into the main reason why I have you on today, and that's to talk about your awesome book, S Is For Suplex. And for those of you watching this on YouTube, you can see that I'm holding in my hand here right now, and that's kind of what's going on for those listening to this on audio. How did you come up with the idea to do this book?
Well, it actually started probably about a year and a half before I started working on the book. I was working on a promotional comic. We've talked about Wrestling Revolver a few times.
Yes.
But I was writing a comic book for them to sell at their shows. And that was right around the time that my daughter was probably 2 or 3 months old when I started working on it. And it just hit me like, another friend of mine that had done comics had written a children's book when his first child was born. And I'm like, I've never thought about doing kids books. I should really maybe go down that avenue. I'm like, what's something that I could pass on my love? And I'm like, I'm already doing this wrestling book. I love wrestling. I want my daughter to love wrestling when she gets older. It just clicked. And so then I came up with the idea of doing, the ABC format. And then it got shelved for a little bit because I couldn't find an artist that I wanted. And then I came across Nick. And as soon as I saw his work, absolutely had to have him. And so it all kind of fell into place once he came along, but then we got derailed again because our first pitch was to do it for Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor, and I don't think I've actually told this story, so
cool.
You get an exclusive. So, Ring of Honor had a coloring book at the time, and this was when they still had the Bucks and Omega. I think Cody was still there. And so because they had this coloring book, I'm like, you know what, let's pitch them an ABC book. So Nick did a drawing of the Young Bucks we just did a really simple page layout and just said, hey, this is this idea we have. I sent them, a loose script of what my ideas were. They took about 2 or 3 weeks to review it, got back to us, said, hey, it's not something we can do right now. Thanks. And so we were a little discouraged. And I thought about giving up on it. I'm like, you know what? It's too cool of an idea. But I know all these other wrestlers that I had worked with on the Wrestling Revolver book who are starting to pick up steam. People like Brian Cage, people like Sammy. Maybe, just maybe, we could go that route and just make it like an indie explosion book. And that's how it ended up. And then now, and then all these other, they all started signing with other companies. Not as indie focused as it was when we started, because it took us about 2 years to complete the book.
Wow. So, and that's one thing that I don't think a lot of people really realize is, you go to do a book and it's a very long process. One of my wife's, one of her best friends is actually has a few books out, and it's just my wife has told me, I've talked to my wife's friend and stuff, and it's a long process. And can you detail, like, just kind of maybe shed some light on what the process is from, like, okay, I'm going to write this book, or I have this idea for a book, like how much work is actually involved in, like how long the process usually takes from like when you have the idea that you want to do the book and you start working on it to when you see like a finished product and it's on shelves, or, in this case, like on Amazon where people can buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, this one took about 2 years start to finish from when we started working on it to when it actually was originally supposed to be released, which ended up being pretty early on in the pandemic. And then again, it got released about 6 months after that. So the actual writing process went really quickly on this to start, but it was a much simpler book. So it was, A is for announcer. The announcer says who's coming to the ring. B is for babyface. Babyface are good wrestlers. Like, it's a very simplistic book to write. So I handed it off to Nick in about a month. And then at that point in time, we only had, I think, 25, 26 wrestlers that were going to be in the book. And we were going to start doing repeats. So then he's a wrestler, so they would appear on multiple pages. So then he started doing layouts and things, and then I kept adding wrestlers. And then we were up to 40 wrestlers, and then we were up to 50 wrestlers. And then we were at, I want to say, 60 some wrestlers in the book when we pitched it to publishers the first time. And this was after about a year. We had a quote unquote final version of the book with 60 wrestlers in it. It was still back to that very simple language. The layouts weren't super dynamic, and we got a publisher that was interested, but they wanted to sell the book for $25 as a hardcover. And it's like, first and foremost, it's a kid's book. It's an awesome wrestling collectible, but it's a kid's book. And so we backed out of that contract, before we signed it. And then we offered it up to Trism Books, which is who my first choice for publisher was. They're based out of Chicagoland. They're actually out of Deerfield. So they're only a couple hours from me because I'm right on the border of Iowa and Illinois. They had done the Colt Cabana book.
Oh, that's a great one.
It is. And that was one that, again, really inspired us to do this book. Because I think I bought that book right at the time Prin was born. And then they were just getting ready to announce that they were doing the Elite books. So we pitched them the idea. They really liked it, but they told us we had a ton of work to do. So then we spent the next almost full year completely revising the book start to finish. So my writing process went from a month to probably 5 months.
Okay.
Back and forth on different versions of the text and going with a longer version. Now it's in like stanza formats, but it was probably 7 or 8 lines per page, and then now it's down to 3 or 4. Tightening up the language, going through with a professional copy editor, and then once that was done, Nick was able to start redrawing the pages they wanted to redraw, which included me adding even more wrestlers. And that's how we ended up getting to 92 wrestlers and that dog.
Wow, 92 wrestlers. So,
and that doesn't include the wrestlers we had to cut out. So throughout all this process, we started getting wrestlers signed by NXT. But because we were so early on in the process and the book was going to be out so much later, there are some wrestlers in the book now that are signed with NXT, but we ended up having to cut some.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns out some of the wrestlers that got signed went through NXT and then left NXT between when we cut them from the book and when the book was finally released. So there's probably 10 or so wrestlers that we had signed that didn't make it to the final version.
Okay. Are you able to let my audience know who like some of those wrestlers that were unfortunately cut from the final version are?
Yeah, absolutely, because they're super wonderful and fantastic about it. Jazzy Gabbert was one of them who was signed to NXT UK. Rachel Ellering, ACH, and then a couple others that I'd have to go back through my files. Nobody that really stayed on super long term.
Okay.
But at the time, Chelsea Green.
Oh,
how could I forget Chelsea? Chelsea was literally the first woman signed to the book, and then also the first person we had to cut out.
Wow.
So
okay. So you had, what'd you say, like 93 wrestlers in the final version, correct? If that was the number?
92 and a dog.
92 and a dog. Well, those 92 wrestlers, okay, so you have an idea, say you want so-and-so wrestler on there. What is the process that you had to go through to get them on board with the book? What was that process like?
Each one was a little different. The majority of them to start were wrestlers that I already knew from doing the Revolver book. So guys like Sami Callihan, I already knew, Brian Cage, and then even I guess they're MSK now, but they were the Rascals,
right?
Wentz and Dez. So those were pretty easy because I already knew them. So I just shot them a quick email and said, "Hey, we did that comic together. Now I'm doing a children's book. Do you want to be in it?" Easy enough. Then some other ones, I hit them up at shows.
Mm-hmm.
So like at Revolver shows, or I did a couple Rise shows, Warrior Wrestling, all in the Midwest-based shows. Saw them at the show, explained to them. I had copies of pages so that they could see, and just said, "Hey, I'm doing this book. Would you be interested in being included?"
Mm-hmm.
I would say 90% of the wrestlers that we approached were super excited about it, said yes almost immediately. Especially if I got to see them face to face.
Right.
Tessa Blanchard made me wait an entire show because Tessa, for all the flack she gets on social media, is one of the sweetest, nicest, and absolutely most hilarious human beings I've ever met in my entire life.
Yeah, she gets a lot of flack on social media, but I'll echo those sentiments 100%. Tessa is so kind, she's so sweet, she's very personable. My experience meeting Tessa was nothing but spectacular and stuff. So, and yeah, she was really, really, really cool. And I have some friends that have met her as well too, and would probably say the same thing. But yeah, so. Who was probably was there someone out there, be it, someone on the indie scene or maybe even like a legend or something, who was like the one person that you really would have wanted for this book that you just couldn't get?
If there's anybody, so legend wise, I really wish I could have had some of I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I really wish I could have got Flair.
Right.
I did get a cameo. My wife did get a cameo from Flair for me, so
Oh,
he
nice.
knows the book exists, and that's on my Instagram page if anybody wants to check that out. So you can hear Flair talk about it. But as far as the indies go, I didn't know enough about him at the time, even though I'd seen him wrestle a couple times, but he hadn't quite fully fleshed out the character early enough that we would have even thought to add him to the book. But I wish that I could have got Danhausen.
Oh, that would have been great.
He is so much fun. And I it's too early on to say, but he and I have talked about potentially doing something down the road. So keep your fingers crossed. Maybe something will happen with Danhausen. Again, one of the nicest dudes. But as far as everybody else goes in terms of signing them, a lot of the people I just emailed. I just shot out emails to really, like, I picked the wrestlers because they were my favorite people on the indie scene.
Right.
And then next thing you know, AEW happened and Impact happened and Ring of Honor happened and they all started getting signed. And now it drives my wife crazy because whenever I'm watching a show, like somebody will come out to the ring and, Justin Roberts will say, oh, now coming to the ring, Santana and Ortiz. And I'm like, don't you mean S Is For Suplex stars, Santana and Ortiz?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that I really enjoy about, like, because we're friends on Facebook and stuff, and one of the coolest things I get the biggest kick out of is the excitement that you have. I feel in your post, like when you see your book, out there and stuff. From like seeing things like Leva Bates having a copy of it with her, on like AEW or AEW Dark, or just the pictures you get. Like, I think I sent you one with my kid and stuff, like when we got the book and stuff. What is it like for you to see your book like out there on an episode of AEW Dark, or like just getting a picture from someone that's bought in your book and be like, hey, this is me with my kid reading this book? What is that like for you?
It is so surreal. And the thing is, like, I worked, as a comic writer for almost 10 years, and had stuff published. I remember the first time I had a book published that you could actually go to a comic book shop that wasn't my local store to buy it. And it wasn't something that I had self-published. And I thought, like, this is it. This is the coolest thing that I'll ever do writing wise. Everything that's happened with S Is For Suplex is so much cooler. I can't even begin to describe, like, the day that it went up on Amazon, I lost my mind. I'm like, people can order this book. It's not going to come out for 6 months, but they can order our book. But then, like you said, when Leva brought it out on AEW TV, like, it was breathtaking. Like, I didn't know what to say, because it was so surreal. Like, not only is this something that I really cared about, but it's something that she cared enough about that she wanted other people to see the book. Or when it got chosen to be part of Pro Wrestling Parade.
Yes, that was one thing I was hoping we'd get into as well too. So carry on.
Yeah, it was just it's just so cool. And especially with the kids' books, I think that's a big reason why it feels so different than when anything else I've ever written, is because people are telling me stories about their kids and their kids loving the book. And when we started signing the wrestlers, like Bob Holly's like, oh, I need an extra copy for my grandkids, like, holy cow, like, it's something people want to pass on to their families.
Right. And
because I've got a daughter, like, I know how cool it is whenever she sees something that she's excited about. So to know that, like, somebody's kid is that excited about something I wrote and something that we put 2 years of work into, it just blows my mind. It's just an indescribable feeling of joy.
Right. So yeah, and you mentioned your daughter, and she is a doll. She just always say, all the pictures I see you post of her on Facebook, she's always seems like she's just so happy and just so carefree and that, and I think that's awesome. So does she watch wrestling with you?
A little bit. it's there's so much wrestling out there
Right.
that is on all the time. In my house, like I'm constantly watching wrestling of some form, and she hasn't had too much interest in it. But then I'd actually canceled the WWE network a couple months ago because I found that I wasn't watching the pay-per-views. I was still watching the regular TV, but I redid it for Royal Rumble, and the women's tag match and the pre-show, she just got super hooked because of Asuka.
Nice. I think I remember.
And she's like, I love the girl with the pink hair. I love the girl with the pink hair. And like, just could not take her eyes off the TV the whole time. And I'm like, you know what? I'm so glad not only do you love wrestling, but you also love one of the best wrestlers in the world.
Right. Yeah. That's like I said. And how old is she now?
She's going to turn 4 in May.
Awesome. Yeah. My little guy is 5. He'll be 6 in a couple months in April. And like I said, he'll sit there and watch it with me, but for a little bit, then he'll go off and play and stuff. But the one thing is his face. So your daughter's favorite wrestler, I'm just going to assume is Asuka right now, correct? Because
right now, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, my son, just every time, and like for the longest time, he would be like, "Oh, who's your favorite wrestler?" Like, or he would just see someone who's like, "Oh, that's my favorite wrestler," and stuff. But every time now that I ask him, he actually has a legit favorite wrestler. He loves Roman Reigns right now.
That's awesome. And that Roman Reigns is the perfect wrestler for kids. Like he's larger than life. He's got a cool look. He's got the tattoos. Like he looks like a monster. So he's the type of kid that we would have loved as kids, or the type of wrestler we would have loved as kids.
Right. Yeah. And obviously right now his the Roman Reigns character, I think is the best it's ever been.
I agree.
And such. So, but I mean, yeah. I'd always hope that if my son got into wrestling, like he would be like go for a guy like say Roman, or like even though he doesn't really wrestle that much anymore, John Cena. My son also likes Cody because he knows that's Daddy's favorite wrestler. Cody's my current favorite wrestler right now and stuff and that. But it's really cool. So now, like I mentioned before, my wife, she'll watch it with me if I have it on, but she won't go out of her way to watch it and stuff. What is your wife's stance on professional wrestling?
For a while, when we first got together and when we were in college, she did not understand it at all. It was kind of like, oh, this is weird. So then when we moved in together, I didn't watch it that often, but there was one night where she was working late and she came home and I was like hooked. Cause I didn't realize that Daniel Bryan and CM Punk came to WWE, and I loved them in Ring of Honor. And I'm like, wrestling's great. We're going to be watching wrestling all the time now. And I can like hear her eyes rolling back into her head. I couldn't just see them. I could hear it.
I know that feeling all too well.
But then she eventually came around and she got some of her favorites. She is a huge Jon Moxley fan.
Okay.
To the point that when he did his final WWE match, like the last night of the Shield was down in the Quad Cities, which is about an hour and a half from us. She told me under no circumstances would we miss it. And so we got tickets and we went. So she was so excited when she went with me to Revolution. She's kind of waned off a little bit. She's not as into it now, but if I turn it on, like she'll watch it. She knows who the wrestlers are. So she'll find someone that she enjoys to watch anytime we do watch it, which is cool. She's just not as hooked as she was.
Right. Yeah. The same thing with me and my wife. She'll watch it and stuff. Like you said, her favorite, I guess if she has one, she loves Braun Strowman.
Yeah.
And that's stuff.
As someone with a giant beard, I'm all for anyone loving Braun Strowman.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife loves Braun Strowman, and then she basically hates just about every other wrestler that has long hair. She has something against people with long, wet hair, so I don't know what it is. I'll ever understand that. But yeah, so a couple more questions here, and then I'll give you some time to plug your book and stuff. You talked about you've been to indie shows and you've been to WWE shows and AEW shows. Which environment would you say you prefer? The glitz and glamour and the lights and the pyro and all that of like a big time WWE or AEW show, or do you prefer the more intimate interactive atmosphere of an independent show, say like Wrestling Revolver or the show that you went to last week. That was, I believe, was Galley Lucha.
Yep. It was a Galley Lucha show. It was inside of a swap meet type area. It was very, very interesting. But yeah, I would say, I mean, I really love the big shows. They're really cool. It's so much fun to go to a WWE show or an AEW show because there is so much production value to it.
Right.
The heart and the interactivity of a smaller wrestling show is so unmatched. So I would probably go with that. I mean, the Galley Lucha show we went to last week had about 20 people in the crowd because of social distancing.
Right.
But it was still so exciting. Everybody absolutely loved every minute of it, and it felt more personable. Like, you know, you feel like the people are really performing for you. And so I really love those small shows, and they're all over the place, and you never know, like, you know, you see somebody, it's so awesome to discover a wrestler
Exactly.
in a small show. Like you see somebody that's like, holy cow, this person is so amazing. The one example I give, because I think he's pound for pound one of the best wrestlers in the world right now, is Ace Austin.
Yes.
From Impact. When we saw Ace, he was just starting out. It was at a Wrestling Revolver show, and, like, you know, he botched a couple moves in the first show that we saw him at. The next show he was getting a little bit better. The next show he was getting a lot better. The show after that, he stole the show. 3 months later, he's on Impact. Then he's main eventing Impact. He's the X Division champion. I mean, it's so cool and be like, that's my guy. That's my ace. You know, we saw him. Or I think it's somebody like Airwolf.
Yeah, I've heard of him. I think I've seen him once or twice at I think he was at a couple Warrior Wrestling.
Yeah, he's in a couple Warrior shows, and then now he's part of Top Flight.
Yes.
And so, like, which, you know, we may have to revise the book because he doesn't wear his mask anymore. And he's the wrestler on the mask page. But it's so cool. Like, someone like him who's only, you know, when I first saw him wrestle, he was like 17 years old. And now he's, you know, wrestling against the Bucks on AEW. It's just so cool to have that connection. And then being able, the other cool thing about going to smaller shows is you get to meet the wrestlers.
Absolutely.
Almost every time.
Right.
And it, you know, as long as you're not like a creepy weirdo, they really appreciate you coming up and talking to them. And
absolutely.
You know, it's just such a different atmosphere. So I would recommend anybody who loves wrestling to go to a small show,
right?
At least once in your life, so you can experience it, and it'll change your outlook on pro wrestling for sure.
100% agree. Like I mentioned, the last show I went to was in October this past year. Was this promotion, Chicagoland Championship Wrestling, which the majority of the my guests on my show wrestle for them, and actually I've become really good friends with the owner. And his name is John Bullard, and if he's a stand-up guy. They run out of Michigan City, Indiana, and it's just I've had a lot of them on the show, and I remember going to that show and, you know, meeting John, you know, outside the VFW that the show was at, and he came over to thank me, and then my friend Brad, who's done a lot of interviews with some of his guys, and, you know, it's like, you know, thank you so much for everything you do for us and stuff. You know, he showed us to our seats, and then, like, I remember going around before the show, meeting a few of the wrestlers, like first time face to face that I had them on my show. And, you know, there was a couple of them that, you know, every one of them was like, oh, thank you so much for, you know, having me on. There was one guy by his name was Jackson P. Larkin, and he came up to me. He's like, dude, I appreciate you having me on my show. You know, I really enjoyed it. And it's just very appreciative. And it's just, they all went out of their way just to thank me for having them on their show. And, you know, and the coolest thing was like, I think it was after the show, I had a few of the guys come up to me and be like, so what'd you think? How'd I do? You know, what'd you think of the show? And it's like, they were asking me for my opinion. You know, here I am, just a fan that's talking to these wrestlers. And after the show, you know, they're coming to me like, you know, so what'd you think? And just when I thought that was the coolest thing, is like, these guys who were out there doing all this stuff to entertain me are asking me for my opinion. And I had never had that happen at a show. And I can't wait to go back for the show in April. I've got some stuff in the works I'm going to be doing with them, and it's just I'm excited to see everybody, and it's just the intimacy and the interactivity between the wrestlers and the fans are definitely what makes me prefer, like what you mentioned, that smaller indie show versus the big time WWE AEW show and stuff. So all right, so yeah, that's really about all I have questions. Oh, actually, you know what? No, I take that back. Obviously, you watch, you're still watching wrestling. You're like me. You're big time into it and stuff. Who are some of your favorites currently right now?
Ooh, so this is gonna be a tough one. So I'll throw out a couple bigger names that I'm really loving. Mm-hmm. I'm absolutely loving really everything that Pac is doing right now in AEW.
Yes.
I love his intensity. He's so awesome. And then a little lower down the card in AEW, John Silver.
Yes. Oh my God. He is my other podcast.
Just taking your moment and running with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I really love. Oh God, man, you're putting me on the spot. Like you said, Danhausen is awesome.
Right.
If anybody hasn't checked out his stuff, and then if you go a little bit further down the indies, I think there's one wrestler. She's actually wrestled a couple times on AEW Dark, but I think that she's going through an injury right now. But I think once she comes back, she's going to end up being a big name. That's Lindsay Snow.
Okay.
She's got like a tattooed bodybuilder look, and I saw her at a Rise show a little while back, and she just totally killed it. But I think hands down, so that I don't pick anybody in the book, because then I'd feel bad for picking somebody that I know but not everybody else. Favorite wrestler right now that I'm rooting for so much, especially this weekend, Mercedes Martinez.
Nice, it's a good one. Yeah,
with Takeover coming up this weekend, I'm so behind Mercedes. Hoping she takes that NXT title home. So
nice. Yeah. So all right. Well, obviously the reason why I had you on is to promote your book. S Is For Suplex. So tell the audience how they can get their hands on a copy of this awesome book, children's book.
Yeah, absolutely. So any major bookseller has it online. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target, Walmart, you can get it all in there. Or you can go to trismbooks.com, TRISM books.com, and then order it directly from the publisher. If you want the cover that you are holding up right there, that is exclusive to Pro Wrestling Crate. So check eBay.
Yep.
You might be able to find copies there. Otherwise, watch my social media. I will probably be throwing up some autographed copies up on there pretty soon. And then once the pandemic's over, I'll be selling it at wrestling shows, at comic book shows, and some book fairs. So
that's awesome. Well, Ryan, thanks for doing this with me. I'm definitely, guys, please, if you've got little ones at home, or even if you don't, it's a great book to have. It's a great, conversation piece, and that. So yeah, just, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's only $10. So that's a very reasonable price. Again, if you got kids, it's a great book to have their library. It actually, I say that this is partially responsible for my son being able to read and stuff. So yeah, guys, please go out and get this book, and because it's awesome. The artwork is great, and who knows, you may see a wrestler there that you may want to look more into and be like, hey, I like this guy, looks pretty cool, I'm going to go check some of his stuff out online. Ryan, anything else?
No, I think you covered it, man. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks again for doing this. And once again, buy the book. And Ryan, thank you again for doing this. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
This is Steve Michaels, the master of the Chicago Bear Hug, and you are listening to Whaddya Say with DDJ. And if you don't listen, I swear I will send the rest of the legacy of brutality after you. And you don't want that.
Ryan, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to chat with me. Again, if you want to buy his book, you can go on places such as Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, BooksAMillion.com, and pick up your copy. Once again, this version here is the variant cover version that was found in the Pro Wrestling Crate. If you're looking for this particular version, I'm sure there are plenty of copies out on eBay for sale. But again, if you've got kids and you're a wrestling fan, this is the perfect book to have in your collection. My kid loves his. And I know there's a lot of other parents who got this for their kids, and hopefully their kids enjoy it as much as mine did. Also, be sure to grab a Whaddya Say with DDJ shirt, or one of the many other cool shirts that are made possible by Pro Wrestling Junkies. Go to www.prowrestlingtees.com/prowrestlingjunkies. You can find my shirt by just typing in the DDJ in the search function on prowrestlingtees.com. And yeah, want to take the time to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Whaddya Say with DDJ, and I'll see you in a week with another brand new episode. Have a good one, everybody.
If you love professional wrestling and great podcasts, check out Whaddya Say with DDJ on Facebook, Twitter, and also on prowrestlingtees.com. In the search field, just type in DDJ and buy the best professional wrestling podcast shirt around.